What if I told you that the legendary sun god Nika just never existed? Or that the Gomu Gomu no Mi is still the same old rubber fruit that we have come to know and love? I mean, after all, part of Nolan's backstory was proving that the sun god did not exist. So I'm going to prove to you that the god that the Gorosei spoke of in chapter 1044 is no different than all of the other false heroes throughout the world. Yes, we have the sun god from Skypiea, but I'm talking Lucy from Dressrosa and even Joy Boy from modern day Wano. All of those exist in name only, and I'll be explaining exactly how this legend of Nika started and what the true history of the Gum Gum fruit is. But first, I need you guys to go ahead and like the video and subscribe. The support on my last few videos has honestly been absurd, but only 0.2% subscribed on their way out.
This is bad! This is very bad!
It don't cost you nothing, so why not help your boy get monetized and go ahead and subscribe. But on to the theory. Nika never existing shouldn't come as much of a surprise given that this fruit is supposedly a mythical zone type in the first place. While we certainly have a lot to learn about mythical zone types, the name should imply that the being never actually existed. And then as I mentioned earlier, the closest that we've gotten to seeing the sun god was during Skypiea, and the entire point of Nolan's entrance was to prove that the sun god did not exist, that Skypieans should not be doing barbaric rituals to appease their false gods. And it isn't like Nolan's side was the wrong one to take. Nolan was most definitely in the right, as we also saw with the sacred trees. Many people use this sun god connection to tie back to Luffy's fruit, which is totally reasonable, but we have to remember that the whole point is that the sun god wasn't real, and that following him like the Shandians were doing was not the right thing to do, because the sun god wasn't real. However, even if there is no actual sun god, there had to be some reason that the legend of this so-called sun god Nika was spread so widely throughout time. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that's because Nika existed in a similar sense to Lucy in Dressrosa or maybe Joy Boy in Wano. Lucy was embodied by two different people in Dressrosa, but in reality, Lucy is nobody. The people of Dressrosa respected him enough as their savior to build a statue of him, and as time goes on, the people in Dressrosa will be revering someone who never even really existed. Future generations will likely hear the legend of Lucy and see the statue and think of him as some kind of god, and maybe even try to pray to him for help, but they're praying to somebody who technically doesn't exist. If they pray to Lucy, Lucy will never come. And the people of Wano now think that the hero of the country is somebody named Joy Boy who already left the island. And this all started because the children were taught it in school as a restructuring of their history course. Why would they learn that it was Joy Boy that saved them instead of Momonosuke or Luffy? Well, that's because Luffy told Momo that he does not want to be a hero and please don't tell anyone about him. We have seen Luffy say this before, such as in Fishman Island, and it's because he is the one who wants to eat the meat, and you can't be that free if you're the hero. So Momo probably had the schools teach that it was Joy Boy instead, which is just really smart for an 8-year-old to do, because this way, it's not like somebody is getting the credit who doesn't deserve it, and Luffy nor anybody else has to try and maintain that perfect hero image that would come with being the hero of Wano, which would mean not eating all the meat. So it works for all sides. I think it's important to note that this double identity theme has been very prevalent throughout all of One Piece. So it shouldn't be surprising to see it exist for Luffy or who we believe to be the endgame gods of One Piece either. For example, Straw Hat Luffy is treated as some menace by most of the world, even being called a crazy monkey demon by Shanks' crew in chapter 1054, but of course we all know Monkey D. Luffy is a benevolent and cheery person. Pirate Hunter Zoro has basically been treated as demotic since literally chapter 2, but we immediately learn that Roronoa Zoro is a very kind-hearted person who wants to do the right thing. Same thing with Robin and being called the Demon Child. Everyone in the story has a fake identity to the outside world that is nothing like who they truly are. I mean, Soja King is one of the classic examples of this as well. This theme is seen for basically every character in Wano, with the Alliance taking on different identities, Denjiro also being the Witching Hour boy, Hiyori being Kamarasaki, Tenguyama being Sukiyaki, etc, etc. So how does that tie back to Nika? Well, we just saw a perfect example of how a legend like that can start. It's all about the story that is shared around the country or the world, not what the truth is. So what if there was a savior, much like Luffy, who wanted to eat all the meat, so he just passed off the credit to some guy who already left the island, named Sun God Nika. This would also be much easier to do if you had a distinctly different looking form to transform into whenever you saved everybody, which the Gomu Gomu no Mi conveniently has. And yes, I said the Gomu Gomu no Mi, not the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. I believe that, much like all of these fake identities in One Piece, the Gomu Gomu no Mi also has a fake identity. While many people think that the true identity is the Nika fruit, that is still very much up in the air canonically. And I think I can give some very convincing evidence that the fruit is still the Gomu Gomu no Mi that we've come to know and love, and the Nika name was given in a similar fashion to the fake names that we've seen throughout the story. In one of our Road to Laugh Tales, we were given several devil fruit lists, and you will find Luffy's fruit in both the Paramecia section and the Zone section under each of those names. They even say that the model Nika moniker is an alternate name, and if you go back to chapter 1044, the Gorosei even say as much, meaning there really is no clear answer as to what the true name of the fruit is right now. If you look further into Road to Laugh Tale and look at the Devil Fruit Awakening section, it says that zone awakenings do not affect their environment. How can the fruit truly be a zone if that's the case, given that Luffy affected the ground and Kaido with his powers? Now, maybe many of you are probably thinking that, yeah, it has a transformation like a zone though, and that's true, but the Paramecia section does not say that there are no transformations possible. And that should make some kind of sense given that we have Paramecias that transform all the time, either growing or shrinking their body, changing their age, breaking their body parts up into smaller pieces, etc. And it's not like Luffy's awakening did anything outside the realm of rubber powers, outside of just turning white. It's all still within the realm of the Gomu Gomu no Mi that we're familiar with. Luffy only changes his colors after he makes his heart beat to a certain tune, so I think the transformation has something to do with how his body is adapting to that change. It looks a lot like Hody with the energy steroids, or maybe Sulong form with the white clothes and the red eyes, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the transformation is due to his heartbeats somehow tapping his body into the same powers as the energy steroids or Sulong or something. Maybe I'll make a whole video on that separately. But overall, I hope you're at least considering the possibility that Luffy's fruit is still the basic rubber fruit that we thought it was for over 1,000 chapters. And also, don't forget that I'm still trying to hit 1,000 subscribers so I can finally get monetized, so please help your boy out. So with all that being said, I think the story of Nika probably went something like this. A young child from an ancient village, probably Shandora, and I'll explain why later, stumbled upon an odd-looking fruit, being the Gomu Gomu no Mi, that then granted him rubber powers. He may not have known a single thing about devil fruits, much like Wano today, and he was probably a strong-headed and benevolent person much like Luffy, so he used these powers to help his country from their oppressors. Over time, he goes on adventures, saving other countries and gathering crewmates just like Luffy did, and ultimately awakening his fruit and gaining his new form. Now, of course, this Nika person wanted to be free and eat all the meat just like Luffy, so he used his new form as a way to disguise himself and pass off the credit so that he could eat as much as he wanted. People probably asked him and his crew who the all-white figure was that helped them, and they would just say, oh, that was Sun God Nika, but he already left. So that way they would be free to do as they pleased without ruining that hero image. But of course, if this guy's name was Nika, then that wouldn't disguise himself very well. So I don't think the original Nika was actually named Nika. And in order to find his true name, let's take a quick look at what we know about the word Nika already. The Nika sound effect basically means a toothy grin or a smile, which ties into the free and fun-loving nature of the fruit already, as well as the name of a chosen one or just victory. So it's a perfect name for a godlike person like Nika. But we have actually seen the name Nika before, and that is with the mermaid quintuplets. They were named Ichika, Nika, yes, literally the same name, Nika, Sanka, Yonka, and then Yonka 2. They all just have a number scheme much like Sanji's family with Ichiji, Niji, Sanji, and Yonji. The word Ni in Nika means 2, and San is 3, just like in Sanji, and then Yan is 4, just like in Yonko, the 4 emperors, and then we have Yonka 2, which is basically a joke because instead of being 5, it's just 4-2, like 4 version 2. So basically we can see Nika's entire family here, and obviously Nika isn't the first name, that's Ichika. So this really got me thinking, if the name Nika really is just like the names Lucy or Joy Boy, what would make somebody pick that name? Well, Luffy picked Lucy on the fly because he couldn't think of anything better. And if the original person who used the name Nika was a lot like Luffy, then maybe they went through a similar thought process. So they had to think of a name on the fly and they just picked a name adjacent to theirs because they aren't very good at lying. Meaning that I think the original Nika was actually named Ichika. which includes the number 1. And he just had to pick a name on the spot, and the best he could think of in that moment was just Nika, which would not hide his name at all. And with Oda being the way he is, this funny gag actually gave Nika a very fitting name with all the meanings that I explained earlier. And if you don't think this is reasonable, I mean, just look at the times that Luffy picked a fake name. I mean, I already mentioned Dressrosa, and obviously Lucy was a horrible name to choose, but another one was early in Wano after he met up with Zoro. Osuru asked what their names were, and Zoro knew that he had to conceal his identity, so he said Zoro Juro Aroni. And then Luffy almost outright says his real name, but Zoro cuts him off, and Luffy couldn't really think of one, and neither could Zoro, so they just say Luffy Taro. Because yet again, Luffy sucks at lying, and obviously this is a dead giveaway, and it's extra bad because Taro and Juro are suffixes that mean first son and second son, which is very similar to the idea of Ichika and Nika. Luffy, Taro, and Zoro Juro barely hide their names, and it tells everyone that they're directly connected to each other. Much like my supposed theory of Ichika and Nika meaning 1 and 2, just like the mermaid quintuplets that I showed before. So if we assume that this is true, then I think Ichika went around liberating various countries under the guise as Sun God Nika so that he would never be beholden to living up to that image, thus allowing him to eat all the meat that he wants. And then after saving enough people around the world, the legend of Sun God Nika was in full effect. Everyone began worshipping Sun God Nika, and for good reason. He had saved them from tyranny not that long ago, and many of them saw him with their own 2 eyes. Plus, he could stretch his body, and since nobody knew about devil fruits that long ago, they likely just assumed that he had the abilities of a god. These societies were probably not very civilized, a little like Shandora, so they probably had no problem believing that a stretchy man who saved them was just a god. But in reality, that Sun God Nika that they worshipped never actually existed, and even the name of the devil fruit is a lie. Because as with everyone in One Piece, even gods, they eventually die, except for Kureha. And since there was a severe lack of information about devil fruits, much like Wano, it isn't like there was a lot of research or literature going on about how these things work. So once Ichika died and left behind that fruit, any subsequent person who ate it and then stretched their body would then have the powers of Sun God Nika from the perspective of those around the world. And from that point on, the fruit was then called the human fruit model Nika, because anyone who ate it had the same powers as their Sun God Nika. However, the fruit really does nothing other than give the properties of rubber. I mean, imagine a mad villain finally getting to eat this Sun God Nika fruit, thinking that he would just become all-powerful, and then he's just rubbery. It's a very Oda-esque thing to do in my opinion. And then one last thing to connect Luffy and Ichika or Nika as people is that they may just be direct relatives. If Ichika was truly the sun god of his era and people worshipped him much like Luffy is revered in many different places, getting statues such as in Dressrosa, then Nika or Ichika would probably be revered in some form, and the country with the most direct connection to the sun god is Skypiea, since they worshipped him. And on the Golden Bell in Skypiea, you can actually see a monkey with a straw hat. And lastly, there's even this mysterious Shandian chief that looks exactly like Garp, and he even wears a very similar dog hat. It's as if Ichika's full name could be Monkey D. Ichika. Now I know that's super tinfoily, but maybe they saved the world as Sun God Nika, and then were revered in the form of a monkey with a straw hat on the Golden Bell in their home country because they knew his true name, and they hid it in the form of a monkey, such as the family name Monkey D, and then with a straw hat that may symbolize the sun. And now Ichika's descendants are, of course, Luffy, and then maybe also this Shandian chief that looks like Garp's brother or something. I know a lot of this is a stretch, but I may make a totally different video on this. I just thought it was interesting that this all kind of connected. And then one other really exciting thought that is at the very depths of the rabbit hole is that Ichika may have just died fighting the originator of the devil fruit tree. This whole theory assumes that these events occurred around the time when devil fruits first came into being, since nobody knew about them or were eating them yet. And this helps explain how someone so powerful for their time could even die in the first place. This could also set up a situation where throughout history we have had Nika and then Joy Boy and now Luffy try to free the whole world from tyranny, and now maybe the first two failed in some cataclysmic ways, but we know that Luffy will eventually succeed. Well, if you made it all the way to the end, you probably liked it at least a little bit, so go ahead and like the video and please subscribe. And maybe you even want to check one of these two videos that are probably already on the screen. Later.